All right, Jason, welcome to the podcast. I've been looking forward to this for the 2 or 3 weeks we've had it planned. So today is going to be all about direct to seller marketing and how you've been able to become a master of that. So before we get started into the details, how in the world did you get into real estate, Jason?
My story started back in 2008. I got back from a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the whole economic world had just crashed. I was also raised super middle class. I don't even know that I knew more than one or two entrepreneurs. So, I thought the person that made the most in the world was an anesthesiologist. Like, go to school, get a degree, follow the process. So I did just that, went to school, got a degree in radiation therapy, and was set to go make my 60 to 85 grand a year, working a day job and throwing into the 401k and eventually retiring someday. Along the way, I got assigned a clinical site that was an hour drive away, listened to a bunch of books, and just kind of learned the self improvement industry, Rich Dad, Poor Dad being one of them, a bunch of other books and things like that, and just got really into becoming the best version of myself and was super passionate about real estate investing. So got my first job as a radiation therapist. But along the way, from when I started that journey to when I ended, I had changed completely as a person and was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. There's a much longer version of the story, but I was like, I'm going to go do real estate. Now, I still had the wiring and background of a 9 to 5 job type person. So I took a different path than a lot of others. I went and got a job working for the only person I knew that was doing real estate. The interesting part of that is I asked him for a job. He was basically a one-man show at the time with like an EA and a construction crew. And he said no. And then I asked him again, said no, asked him a third time, said no again. Fourth time, I said, tell you what, here's the deal. I'm going to show up tomorrow and work for free. I'm just going to be here providing value. And my only request is if at some point somewhere in the future, you're like, hey, this guy's valuable, then I'll pay him that. So I worked for free for a month, just showing up every day, providing as much value as I could. And at the end of it, he was like, well, you figured out how to become an integral part of everything I do. So I guess I better start paying you. That's how my journey started, was working for free for somebody else. So we started sharing a desk together in the same single office, basically paced them to do 12 homes a year. And then together we scaled that all the way up to over 150 homes a year, doing big commercial projects, doing new build construction, you name it. I was what we would call in our world like the COO, running most of it besides the construction. Stayed with him for 5 years. And then at that point, started my own journey. So that's when I started my Utah company, Creation Utah. It's been around now 6 years. We started really small. He was heavier on the flips. I am what I would call a cherry pick flipper. The light remodels, easy, straightforward houses that I do just for sake of maximizing opportunities. But I'll do 120 to 150 deals a year. This year may wind up being a few more than that based on our pace. But I will actually do a more than $10,000 remodel on 20 of them.
You do what I do. It's just you go for the smoking deals, and then the other ones you wholesale or double close, and the weird houses you avoid. You're smart because you're controlling all your inventory via marketing.
Exactly. Majority of those deals comes through marketing. I do have a networking arm as well, but like I'm not buying from other wholesalers or anything like that. It's just vast majority marketing. And then
Right.
because of that, I got really, really good at marketing. And I had a friend, Stephen Williams in the Bay Area, say, hey, you've got this marketing thing figured out. Would you be willing to help me? So I said, sure. Started helping him and it worked. Then I had a guy in Boise say, hey, can you help me? And I said, sure, and it worked. And then our friend Roy Aluwalia said, me, I said, sure, and it worked. Then at Investor Fuel, ran into Mike Hambright, who had a national presence, and he was like, hey, you bring your part, I'll bring my part. And that's essentially when Investor Machine was born.
Basically, you were helping people on a case by case basis, and then you guys were able to take the networking and the stuff that Mike has, and then the marketing knowledge you have, you blended them together, and that's how Investor Fuel took off.
Investor Machine.
Investor Machine, sorry.
So yeah, that was 5 years ago, and we've grown since. So now we've got clients all over the nation, millions a month in marketing. At our core, we do really, really high level lists and then direct mail. I have been a client all along the way. I'm super big on get 1% better every day, improve the product, make it get better. I've been a consistent like 4 to 6x return on my own Investor Machine marketing in Utah. But just end of last year is when we really finally put all the pieces together, and it has turned into an awesome product. I'm at 11x return so far this
Oh,
year on it, and our client base all over getting the best results they ever have. It's cool to really feel the momentum of something that is absolutely like dialed in now, where for a long time, good product, doing well, but like totally different when you have something that's super dialed in.
100%. You're just optimizing daily, and then you hit that point to where the real growth is. And I tell a lot of people, the new investors, we have a little coaching group we run. You can be the best salesperson in the world, but if you have terrible leads, your sales process is not going to be really relevant. So when it comes to marketing, I think we'll make this list-based marketing today and direct mail.
I don't mind discussing all marketing because for me, in my Utah company, I have 20 different marketing channels that I run.
Oh my gosh.
Now, 40% of my revenue still has come from one of those channels, which is my Investor Machine list-based marketing. That's definitely where my deepest expertise is. But to be able to do the number of deals I do, it's not just me mailing my Investor Machine list for sure.
Okay. So there was really one company for a while that was like a predictive model list. What the heck is a predictive list? Because it sounds cool and obviously it works and it's much more expensive than buying records off of ListSource or downloading them from PropStream. Is it just a giant stack list of niche people? Is it consumer data? What does that really mean?
This is really good because not a lot of people understand this. This is my whole world. You're talking about multiple different things. You're talking about the stack as well as you're talking about the predictive, right? So I'll start by talking about the stack. There are multiple different ways. You have softwares out there like Batch, which can stack. So you can go pull lists from Batch and from PropStream, ListSource, other places like that, and you can stack. Where our core and where 80/20 are coming from is you can stack a lot more than you think you can. You can stack the zip code in addition to anything else. So like when you go to ListSource or PropStream, you say, hey, I want homes in this zip code or I don't. You say, I want homes older than 1960 or I don't. I want absentees or I don't. A cool thing that the companies like 80/20 and Investor Machine can do with the stacking is you can say, I want this zip code a 5 and this zip code a 4 and this zip code a 3. And I want 1960 plus a 5. And if it's 1980 to 1960, I only want that a 3. That's kind of the stacking that comes in with that. And that's kind of what we have been built on. So now let's talk the predictive modeling. There's stacking, and then there's what I call like awesome stacking, right? And that's what we've done. That's what 80/20 has done. So now let's get into the Audantic side, which is the modeling side. So that is in your area, who sold to investors in the past. And now let's go create a lookalike audience of who sold to investors in the past. And what's the most information we can get about someone to most closely identify who sold to someone. In this regard, it's saying we're going to look at an average and say, okay, if we did every door direct mail and we mailed everybody, let's say there's a 1% chance that we get somebody this month who's going to sell to an investor. So every door direct mail is 1% from area to area, market to market.
Like Florida is different than Washington, is different than New York, is different than California.
Shockingly different.
Okay.
So what's interesting is in Utah, for example, someone between 60 and 70 is 3 times as likely as the average to sell. At 90 to 100, they're 2.5 times. And if they're an absentee, then they're this. And if they're a smoker, then they're that. And if they've lived in the home for more than 15 years, then they're this. And basically, kind of like what you would do in Facebook, you throw in a bunch of inputs to say, hey, these are people that have bought my product before. Now go create a lookalike audience. And now I'm going to go market to them.
Interesting.
That's the general idea behind predictive modeling. So what's kind of cool for me personally with Investor Machine is I talked about getting that consistent return on the hyper stacking. And then I talked about really dialing in the product and taking it to the next level. The part that I was missing is the predictive modeling. I already had all of the advantages of the stacking, but I was making some wrong choices on what I was stacking. I was saying I should focus on these codes, and I was saying I should focus on evictions or notice of defaults. And that was amazing in this market, but not great in this market. The thing that really took Investor Machine to the next level is being able to marry the world, hyper stacking plus predictive modeling. The other part that we uniquely have, which is getting motivation points direct from the county.
That's the key. And every county is going to be easier and harder to deal with depending on the area.
It's an army of 70 data miners, multiple of them trying to find them and figure it out. Every single motivation point that gets pulled in gets QA'd, and that gets QA'd so that it's accurate. It all ultimately goes into our software. And we've been doing all of that for a long, long time. It's been great. But the thing that I learned from getting more into the modeling side is it's all just numbers and stats. The other thing that we had to change recently, and this is getting like deep into the Investor Machine nerdy business, is
I love it.
a lot of the motivations we were pulling in market. So we had to marry the modeling with the motivation points as well. For example, data miners going in and pulling records. They were going and pulling the easiest records because they're held accountable to getting a certain number of leads per hour. So they're saying, hey, what's the lowest hanging fruit? We'll say a probate increases your likelihood to sell from 1x to 7x, right? You get a 7x more likelihood. And then on this other side, we have a mechanics lien. Let's say a mechanics lien only improves us by 50% instead of 700%. The problem was the data miners were going and getting a bunch of mechanics lien because they were easier to get than probate. So the other part we had to go in and change based off this information is we have to point the data miners to say, sorry, can't get mechanics lien anymore. We got to spend our time on probate and we'll adjust your numbers because of it. Or any of the other 30 motivation points that we go and pull.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense because human nature, low hanging fruit, easy to get a lien that's publicly recorded versus digging to get some sort of probate record, but it's more valuable at the same time if they can get that information. I just want to summarize the predictive one to make sure that me and the listeners understand. So the predictive model is more of like demographics, lookalike audience situations versus like hasn't paid property taxes in pre-foreclosure, vacant, which would be like a triple stack situation, which is just data off of the property versus data in the predictive side is more off of the individual who has had the behaviors to sell to an investor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say at its simplest level, not to say that the predictive modeling people can't go look at some of those other aspects as well. And, they're not like entirely separate.
Well, I'll give you an example. So in Reno, I bought the Audanic list. The houses that I bought, one of them for sure was a non-sophisticated owner who was out of state, who had a criminal living inside. And, it was a fairly easy customer to work with based on their situation. But like when I was looking at it after we did the house, I'm like, okay, I just spent all this money on this predictive list and it worked, but I could have also gotten the same prospect on this absentee owner list that I, in theory, could have bought for $300. So I'm like, was that worth it? I don't know.
And this is why in a lot of sales calls for Investor Machine for people, especially in small markets, I will tell them, don't do it. If you're in a population 100,000, the whole purpose of the Audanic, the Investor Machine, the 80/20s, the whole point is narrowing. For example, for me, if I'm moving into like St. George, Utah, small market, I don't need the Investor Machine list. For less than the cost of the management fee and the sign-up fee, I can mail everybody. Just mail everybody,
They're going to be on the list regardless. But if you're in Seattle where there's 7 million people, you cannot mail 7 million people. You have to figure out who's worth pursuing versus who's not.
And
So,
that's our whole purpose. If you can't mail everybody, who do you narrow down to?
so that makes sense on the data standpoint. Now, we're talking direct mail marketing. How often do you recommend mailing a pool of prospects from a sequential perspective? Like monthly, quarterly? Because you could overdo it and you can underdo it, and that's a big part of the recipe.
So I'll tell you what we do at Investor Machine. Half of it is, the high performing list. The other half of it is the done for you. Because you're right. There's a lot of people out there with good lists that blew it on doing it wrong.
Correct.
You can go get the Audanic list and mail it one and not get a response and be like, for these guys, I want my money back. And I guarantee you, if you called Chris or Eli, they'd be like, oh yeah, that totally happened. Because that's just the nature of us as investors. Like, dude, I spent $4,000 on this and I got no return. I can't spend another 4. Like, sorry, that's
Yeah.
marketing. So our favorite cadences are hitting every 30 days and every 60 days. And again, we're talking the top of the list. So technically the Investor Machine list is every record in the county, sorted from after we've gone through and done our modeling plus our stacking and everything else that we do. The Investor Machine list is everyone in order. This is the one that's the most likely to sell to this is the one that's the least likely to sell. From there, we back into the budget and say, okay, we're going to hit the top 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever of the list based off of your comfort level and what you spend. People usually start small and get to bigger, but people that are at the very, very top, we like to hit them every 30 days. And then from there, we found every 60 days is our favorite cadence. Somewhere between 30 and 60. So again, our software hasn't automated. These guys qualify for 30. These guys qualify for 60. And then everybody under that, you can skip trace and do whatever you'd like to from there, but they're not worth the cost of a mailer based off of your current budget restraint. They're sitting in line waiting for one of two things to happen. One, you to spend more, or two, someone at the top sells their house, then the next guy comes in and replaces them, or they have a new motivation change, or, the next quarter we go analyze who sold to investors most recently, and now they make the list. But for the most part, there's a big chunk just waiting on the sidelines.
It's like a bench for a football team. So with that being said, now we're looking at the right list, the right cadence of mailing these people. I'm doing postcards for bigger mailers, 10,000 plus, and it still gives me a good return. And my cost is cheaper than what a letter would be. Cause I really haven't found, unless you're like a black belt, like niche list of 1,000 or less of the best you could ever find. I don't think it makes sense to send a letter if you're mailing 30,000 people. Because I always say a postcard has a 100% open rate and a letter doesn't.
So I actually have really good data on this. So when we made all of these changes around our product and improvements, one of the ones that we changed is if elected into, which the vast majority of our customers elect into, we put a phone number that has an immediate pass through. So it rings to us and then immediately rings to you. So we can see total number of calls and responses and everything else based off
Yeah.
of creative, et cetera. So years ago, I was kind of on team, a creative's a creative. Like it's mostly about the list. If there's one thing that I learned, I just said this yesterday to Chad Young, who is also a Washingtonite. If there's one thing that, my new move into what I'll just call making decisions based off of data. Previously, we had an awesome software, a great way to stack, but now every decision I make is based off of data and what worked rather than my gut. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that I used to think I was smart and had a good gut. And now I learned that I'm not, and I don't have a good gut. I just lean in on data. So I used to
Or
think that creative doesn't matter. It's just about mailing the right list. No, not at all. In my Utah market, I can show you two different creative. This one is the Smart Jason creative, AKA I paid a graphic designer and a creative writer thousands of dollars to help me design this exactly right. It had everything. Every word was measured. I was so excited about it.
like a Dan
This
Kennedy
one,
sales letter.
yes, it was perfect. This
Yeah.
one over here is the same stupid street view you find at YLHQ with the stupid doodle guy, right? Somewhere between double and triple the positive good response rate is what we got on the stupid piece of crap street view than we did on my awesome creative. So it's not even just about postcards as compared to letters as compared to anything else. And that street view one isn't even our best performer on there. Just the one that I thought was great wasn't great at all. So it's not just about postcard versus letter. It's also about what specific postcard
What
is.
is on the postcard?
And I mean, I can tell you exactly what the ratio is of how much more or less likely someone is to respond to you if you include your website on it or not. So I'll give that one for free. What do you think? Include your website or don't include your website?
I'm glad you brought that up because I was team don't do that for Google review purposes. I changed my mind and I started putting my website and we're getting way more leads and I'm putting our email on there.
One huge one for us too is the power of call or text. If you only have a call on there, you're missing out on a ton of leads. There's a lot of people, especially kind of an embarrassing thing. They don't want to jump on the phone. Your creative absolutely should include a
Call
call
or
or
text this
text
number.
on there, which is like, hey, you can text me. I'm real. You're not calling some like major corporate headquarters in Dallas, like, hey, I'm just sending you a creative. Just text me. So I will say, from a direct response standpoint, your first thought process was right. You get way more direct responses without a website.
So you're saying just call or text phone number. That's it. No website.
I'm quoting you a national number. Go dive into a more sophisticated market.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get an entirely different response. Again, it varies wildly. Bentonville, Arkansas, that creative crushes it. You send that creative in Portland and they're going to find where you live, right?
That's interesting.
And that's not to say that if you put a website on there, people don't go to the website and then respond. But what I found is the vast majority of people don't credit well what goes to website to then go to an individual person. And even still, you should only send people to the digital world if you have a strong presence there. If you have a basic Carrot website with no reviews, you're not PPCing your own name, you don't SEO well, it's just a generic site. Because if they come to the digital world in Utah, they're going to hit Cody Hoffine, Andy McFarland, me, Matt Oviatt, and a bunch of people that have spent millions of dollars over the last 6 years in a banging online presence. Like, good luck. You're coming against hundreds of Google reviews, every single thought process thought through. I'm targeting my keywords. I'm targeting your keywords. Like, don't send me to the digital world. You're going to want to keep it print.
The only number I care about is return on ad spend. Like everything else is whatever. I actually just pulled my numbers up. We have a 5.7 ROAS as of today off of mail based on the spend we've made this year. And that's something I'm fine with, right? That works. And PPC is 1.75, which is garbage. which we're working on to get it better.
My PPC is a lot worse than my mail right now.
So here's the thing with PPL, and I've put a lot of effort and time into figuring this stuff out. Like, what are they doing? Okay, first thing is this. Their incentives are not in line with the customer's incentives. They want to get you as many leads as possible. Leads, I'll me keep that vague. And if they get you leads, they did their job. Did the lead answer? Did the lead not answer? Are they qualified? Are they not qualified? It doesn't matter. They're selling you leads. And if you're buying PPL, which we do a little bit when we need to supplement, you're literally paying money to compete with these guys and you're driving up your local cost. You're basically kind of screwing yourself over. That's how I look at it. Because like the cost per click is going to go up because these guys are bidding all over the country and they're controlling their traffic. They're selling it to you for $300, $500, $700 a lead. And now your cost in your local market, your cost per click on certain keywords is going to go up. So I don't like it for that reason. I think it used to be really good when they were truly getting organic searches, but the demand for that product has risen and there's only so many searches you're going to get in any market. So they had to go out and they had to go more like banner ads and demand gen campaigns. And that's drove the quality down. And that's why a lot of people are getting pissed off about it. It is what it is.
I think they benefited more than anybody
Oh,
from
yeah.
the decline of cold calling and texting, which, by the way, I disagree with this fundamentally for a number of reasons. But for your average everyday cold call texter, the thing that made the most amount of sense to them after cold calling and texting was PPL. It's cheap. I can get a response quick. I can scale it up and down really quickly. It's easy. I can buy just one lead. I don't have to wait for a big freight train to get moving. I don't have to pay a management fee. Like, this makes sense for my type. And there was a big group of those that all jumped into PPL. I actually think that's one of the last channels. You have texting and cold calling all the way over here, all the way at this other side is PPL. I would look at mail, Facebook, SEO, your own PPC, all of those before I would look at PPL. And this is from a PPL customer. The other thing, if my business was based on PPL, I would be less likely to sleep than if my business was based on texting and cold calling. Everybody knows texting and cold calling is dying. It's a train running out of stations. But PPL, you're one competitor clicking plus away from your business being gone, or saying, like, I'm going to keep clicking plus till I get it every time. And there's nothing stopping the other guy from saying, I just want to dominate this channel until you never want to spend anymore. I don't care if I make nothing, and just owning it, and your whole business is gone. So yeah, you've got to have your own channels, your own business intelligence that you can lean in on and rely on, or it's just a matter of time until the spigot's gone. Which is why I said kind of at the start, I like the idea of talking about multiple marketing channels, is because the only way to have a successful business is multiple strong marketing channels. You and I have in common that, I mean, if I go only down to one, it's mail.
Me too. Same thing.
And then I'll build out from there. But
Yeah.
I'm super grateful I don't have one, because I've had bad quarters in mail. I'm sure you
Oh,
have
me
too.
too. All the time.
If you
Happens-
just looked at the quarter, it's like, why am I doing this? This is horrible. And then you have years like I'm having this year. I'm like, dude, I'm printing money with mail. This is amazing. And everything in between. So every channel is riding a roller coaster. I think my digital beat my mail in the second half of last year. And then this year, the mail is smoking the digital, and it's not even close. But if I was just mail, I would have had a tough year last year. And if I was just digital, I'd be talking layoffs this year.
Well, the thing with mail that I like is it could be like a really good spine of your business. And then from the spine, you have the vertebrae that could be PPC and referrals and all that stuff, which we actually, referrals, that's
They're-
like my little secret sauce. Like, even though there's no secret, you're getting deals essentially for free. I might be splitting those deals with people who bring them to me. Sometimes I'll just bring the money down. But I'm like, this 15, 20 grand I got was the zero cost basis, complete net revenue. And people aren't doing that.
It's the most underutilized channel in our
It's crazy. And it's
networking
predictable too.
relationship deal.
For us, at least, like we can rely on it.
I will say, for me, it hasn't been as predictable and reliable. My most predictable, reliable is mail. I think my best year, I did 1.7 million in networking and relationship deals. My worst year, which was like 2 years after that, I did like 200 grand. So I will say it depends a little bit on the market. Like 2021, the crazy ramp up, where it was really tough to come by a deal and everything was worth the time. My relationship deals went
Not
out
there.
big time in that market because everybody was holding on to anything that they had. But in like a balanced market, the networking deals are awesome.
Inspire, yeah. And I've found there's a lot more repeat business there too.
And I have specific networking and relationship managers for this. Like, their full-time job is to just network with and bring in deals. That year I did 1.7 million. It was on like 5 or 6 quality relationships that just kept bringing deals. You can do amazing things with networking and relationship deals.
Oh, 100%. You actually, I'm sure he's cool with this. You taught Jeremiah Dalton how to do this, and he's
Yeah.
had a lot of success. He's literally my best friend in the world. So you showed him the ropes there, which is awesome. So as we start to wind the show down, you are in Utah. That's a tough market. It had some pretty big issues when the rates went up. So what have you seen kind of go on in Utah since the rates have now been higher and that's a new normal? I mean, have you seen the market kind of come back there? Have you still seen it be difficult? Because you're clearly finding a way to be successful there regardless.
2019 was a pretty normal market. 2020, COVID, we took a little drop and then decided to pump trillions in. And, the Fed started printing a whole bunch of money. 2021 to June of 2022 was the bomb. I mean, we were printing money. It felt like as fast as the Fed, and all of us were making money. Like, you didn't need to be a great business owner to be making money in that period of time. It was like the wind was blowing so hard at your back. If you could just put enough gum wrappers together, you could sail. So those times were great. I think it was 2021. I had an awesome year in Investor Machine and an awesome year in the Utah company. And the thing I still did that made me the most was owning rentals, because they had all gone up so much in value that just like breathing and owning rentals, I think they'd gone up like 20% across all of my doors. And it was like disgusting how much money we made in there. So fast forward halfway through 2022, that's when they started jumping up the interest rates really quickly, and Utah got destroyed. We went up as much or more as anyone else in 2022. And then us, Boise, Phoenix, Vegas, we crashed
Reno.
away. I
Yeah.
remember being at Investor Fuel in like September of that year, and a lot of the Midwesters being like, just had my best quarter, things were good. And me and Rob, my COO, being like, what is going on? Like, everybody here seems fine, and we're just getting murdered. Myself and basically every competitor that I know, we wrote checks to keep the doors open from June of 2022 to January of 2023. It was a loss just to
Like were
operate.
these flips not selling? Like what was going with the wholesale not moving?
It
Like,
was
what the
catching a
difference?
falling knife. Things were going down so fast that like you couldn't sell your flips, and you were wholesaling for less and less. Renegotiations were having to happen all the time. It was terrible. Like,
Oh,
as fast as you'd readjust and think you'd figured out what the bottom is,
keep
then
dropping.
the next bottom was going down and down and down. And the thing that started then, which still is the biggest thing that makes the market difficult, is the market became very, very low inventory. So you wound up having, and this is a national problem.
Yeah, this is nationwide for sure.
You look at the total transaction count, it's super, super low in Utah as well as everywhere. And so you think about it, as investors, as wholesalers, we make money based off of transactions happening. If there's half the transactions happening, there's half the ability to go and make money. So prices dropped pretty heavy second half of 2022. And I would say have been pretty level to slight appreciation 2023 through 2024. And these have been more normal months for us. This is kind of feels more like 2018, 2019. The competition in Utah is unprecedented to what it ever has been as long as I've been doing this, because things are going up a little bit in value. It's a fairly solid market in terms of each transaction that you do, but there's the fewest transactions there's ever been, with the most people competing for those same few transactions. Not a lot of sellers selling, the most wholesalers, flippers, and everybody else in the market. So it makes it super difficult to go and actually get the transaction. But when you get them, they're good
They're
transactions.
big spread. So it seems like most sellers you guys are coming in touch with are calling 3 to 5 other competitors.
It's just a revolving door. You're in, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. We've definitely had to master our competing strategies. When I was doing this by myself in 2018, I would compete on like one out of every 4 or 5. And now it's like 90%. Are we competing with one, or are we competing with 19?
I've always
Yeah.
found when we're dealing with that, if there's 1 to 3 other people that I coach my acquisitions guy on, is like, listen, if they're going off of the most money, right, which sometimes that's out of your control, you ask for last look and they run it by you last and you decide if you want to buy it or not. And we've actually done pretty well like that, because every offer usually comes in somewhat similar. Man, we could have this show go on for 3 hours, but obviously that wouldn't be reasonable for both of us because we're busy. So as we start to wind the show down, we covered a lot of information on mailings, lists,
You
marketing.
asked me a lot of questions no one else has asked me before. You got way deeper in.
I'm a numbers guy. That's like literally how I make decisions all day. So I'm like, I got Jason on the horn. I'm gonna ask him the real questions. So in summary here, if people want to check out Investor Machine to learn how to optimize their marketing, what is the best website for them to go to check that out?
investormachine.com. You'll get a little quick run through. Our sales guy, Tom, great, super nice guy. Run through the process, no pressure, help you understand a little bit more, see if it's a fit, make sure there's space in your market. If it's a win-win, would love to be able to potentially work with any of your listeners.
We'll make sure we throw that in the show notes, theinvestormachine.com. Well, Jason, appreciate your time today, buddy. This was a lot of fun to do, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.